Hi guys, I'm going to start on page 26 of A Night Divided. Um, I'm going to post some read alouds. I may not finish before the summer starts, but I will continue to post them until this book has finished. This is A Night Divided, and I always share this with my classes, so I'm hoping you guys will listen because it is an amazing book and it talks a lot about the Cold War and the Berlin Wall. It had been 4 years since I'd seen Dominic, and he would be 14 now. Mama kept a picture of him in the front room, and I mentally compared that with the boy now facing me. His face had lengthened and narrowed, but the hair peeking out from his knitted cap seemed about the right color. I would know him if I saw his eyes, but that was impossible from this distance. Still, there was something in his posture, the way he held one shoulder higher than the other. Dominic used to do that. I remembered because my mother always reminded him to stand up straight. It had been a long time since my smile had stretched so wide. "That's him," I said. "That's my brother." He seemed to recognize me too, or at least he waved. I raised my hand back at him. Although such a simple gesture was far too casual for the importance of this moment. For almost 4 years, neither of us had heard a word about the other, and all we could do now was wave in silence. "Does something over there interest you?" I turned to see a border guard standing right behind Anna and me, close enough that I could see the stitching of his black gloves. He was shorter than average, with white blonde hair shaved so close to his head that he almost looked bald. He was several years older than Fritz, but there were a lot of patches on his uniform, so I gathered he was more than a low-level officer. His name, stitched onto the uniform, was Mueller, and he stared down as if frightening me entertained him. Mueller had come up so quietly that neither of us heard him, but I should have known. Grinzers are often patrolling this area. Of course, my wave to Dominic would have caught one's attention. Beside me, Anna had turned to stone, something like it. She was moving and possibly wasn't breathing. Not me. I wanted to look up as far as his eyes and stare him in the face and tell him there was no crime in looking across the wall. More than anything, I wanted to show him I wasn't afraid. Except that I was. Mueller's rifle hung around his shoulder directly in front of me, and he had one hand on the stock. Maybe it was only my imagination, but I could have sworn that the rifle smelled like blood, as if he had used it on someone before. He lifted it over his head and moved his other hand to the trigger. "I asked you a question," he said. "Who were you waving at?" I turned back, but Dominic had disappeared by then. So I lowered my eyes and said to the officer, "It was nobody, sir." "You'd better remember that the next time someone over there waves at you." He let the cold metal barrel brush against my cheek, then ran it beneath my chin and pushed my head up to face him. "Because those who get too curious about the other side sometimes get to taste my bullets." "Verstanden?" I stared into his icy blue eyes and tried not to let any hatred show in mine. "Yes," I whispered. "I understand exactly who you are." "Then move along. Don't let me catch you stepping here again." I whispered another thanks to him, which almost immediately began to eat my sense of justice. Then I grabbed Anna's arm. As terrified as I had been, she seemed worse. Her skin was deathly pale, and she leaned hard against me as we walked away. When Officer Mueller was out of our sight, Anna released a gasp of air, then said to me, "Promise me, you'll never stop there again, no matter who you see on the other side. Please promise me, Gerda." Though her reddened eyes begged me to agree with her, I couldn't. Maybe I could promise to be more careful next time I stopped, but that was all. I didn't tell her that. She'd have launched into a fit of hysterics, which would have brought on Mueller's attentions again. So I clutched her arm tighter as we continued to walk. My heart was pounding, just as hers surely was, but for an entirely different reason. All I could think was that after 4 long years, I had finally seen my brother, and I hoped it wasn't for the last time. The quote at the beginning of chapter 5 says, "The Germans and I no longer speak the same language." And that's by Marlene Dietrich, who was a German actress in 1960. Since both Mama and Fritz worked through the afternoons, it was sometimes my job after school to stop by the market for food. Most things were gone by then, but Mama said that made choosing easier. This was true. Often by the time I got there, the choice was between red cabbage or white cabbage, as if I cared which one went into my basket. Today, I wandered the aisles, hoping something more exciting would be available. I could afford it if there was. The government kept the prices of everything we might need low. It's just that the shelves were always more empty than full, and what was on them looked or tasted as gray as everything else. The good food was called benders, because if you had something worth trading, the clerk would bend down under the counter to get it for you. But Mama didn't want us bargaining for food. "Just take what is offered on the shelves and come home quickly," she said. More than anything, I longed for a banana. We'd used to have them years ago, and for my 12th birthday last year, Fritz had bought me one off the black market. I still remember its taste. Finally, I got some chicken, a few potatoes, and, of course, cabbage. I also picked up a few cans of cola, proudly made in East German factories. Fritz thought it left a bitter aftertaste and said one day he'd smuggle in a real Western cola for us. "After that," he said, "you'll never want our cola again." "If that's true, then I don't get it," I had responded. "It'll be one less thing that I can buy." Once in line, I stared at the people ahead of me, watching them, watched nothing at all because it was safer that way. Mama described us as practical, durable people, which I think she meant as a compliment, though I never took it that way. Our strength came from the collective. Every school teacher I had ever had said that, until it played like a skipping record in my head. Individuality was a weakness, a sickness of the West. So we all walked in step, eyes ahead, with conversations at minimum. We all smiled, but not much, and frowned, but rarely cried. Nobody could succeed here, but most people around me seemed to be okay with that. It meant they wouldn't fail either. I didn't want them to be like them. At the same time, I was beginning to forget how to be different, how to be my own self. It was the feeling of being swallowed up, and I hated it. That was all I thought as I hurried home with my groceries. We lived on the 4th floor of a drab apartment building that looked more or less like all the other apartment buildings. That wasn't an accident. Beautiful things were signs of individuality. Wherever possible, Mama had tried to provide some beauty inside the apartment, but still our furnishings were spare and simple. With little to look at inside, I went to my room and stared down at the small garden space below. I had buried the peel from Fritz's banana there, hoping it would sprout into a tree this spring. I knew it was impossible, but I still looked every day. And when the tree wasn't there, I always turned my attention to the wall. If I got the angle just right, I could see into West Berlin. "There's nothing but greed and selfishness on the other side," my school teacher often told us. "If you try to look, it shows nothing but greed and selfishness in your own heart." Well, I was greedy and selfish then, because I could never help but look. I couldn't see much, but somehow it seemed brighter across the wall, as if the sun gave more of its light to the west. Maybe the people there were selfish, I thought, because we needed that sunlight far more than they did. Then some movement at the wall caught my attention, and when I saw what it was, I laughed. A rabbit had become trapped in the death strip. They often did, but it was always amusing to see the Grinzers come running to try to chase it away. They didn't like the prints the rabbits left behind in their perfectly smooth dirt. Over the past 4 years, what started as a simple barbed wire fence had evolved into an entire system designed to stop, capture, or kill anyone who tried to get through. In most places in East Germany, even before reaching the wall, there was an open border area that nobody would dare get close to unless they had a death wish. People who encountered the Grenzers there on patrol often disappeared, sometimes for days, sometimes forever. Behind it was the Backlin Wall, which I passed every day. It was a simple concrete wall that surrounded West Berlin, making that free half of the city an island with communist East Germany. What I knew of the area behind the Backlin Wall came from only glimpses that I saw from my window, or occasionally from Anna's bedroom, if she didn't catch me looking. And from what Fritz told me that he had seen while out bricklaying, beyond the Backlin Wall was another barbed wire fence that might have been electrified, which I figured was bad enough, but Fritz thought it was something else. He believed touching that wire sent a signal to the guards in the watchtowers. If it was true, that would be worse. Past that was the strip that we called the Death Strip. The government hadn't given it that name, but they didn't discourage its use either. Soldiers and fierce dogs patrolled it. Barriers and deep trenches were set up to stop any vehicles that tried to crash through, and the dirt was left smooth, so on the rare chance that someone did get that far, it would be easy to follow them. Soldiers were ordered to shoot on sight and shoot to kill. They never hid that fact, and they had done it before. Western television broadcast the pictures of border guards carrying dead bodies out of the death strip or pulling them from the water. I'd seen it myself, at least when we could catch the television signal here. Our government would then respond with ridiculous excuses such as heart failure or a swimming day gone bad. Well, heart failure didn't cause bleeding wounds ripped through a person's gut, and nobody ever swam the Spree River for fun. They had tried to escape and had failed. Reminders of our own fate should we try it too. There were some successes, no doubt, though we didn't hear about them as often. Those who escaped usually kept quiet about it. They didn't want their loved ones left behind in the East to be punished. Eventually, the rabbit hopped away, or perhaps someone I couldn't see chased it off. I never could figure out how the rabbits got inside in the first place. Since they couldn't pass through a solid concrete wall, they would have had to dig a tunnel underneath. Even the animals wanted to leave East Berlin, I supposed. I would have kept watching for the rabbit, but Mama called me in to supper. I came in and plunked down beside Fritz, but right away it was clear his mind was elsewhere. He picked at the food until Mama finally set her spoon down and said, "You're quiet tonight. What's wrong?" "Just had a hard day, that's all." No, that wasn't all. I knew it, even if she didn't. Since the wall had gone up, Fritz never told Mama anything that made her more worried or more sad than she already was. So if he went as far as admitting that it had been a hard day, that meant something awful had happened, or would soon. Fritz met my eyes and offered a grim smile, but he looked away when Mama turned to me and asked, "What about your day, Goethe? You had a pioneer meeting." Yes, I reached for another slice of bread. They had an announcement a few days ago. The first person ever to do a spacewalk was outside the spacecraft for over 12 minutes. He's Russian. They want us to be proud of that, though I don't see how it has anything to do with Germany. They want us to be proud of it because it means the East beat the West. Nothing more. Fritz's tone was more biting than usual. Something was definitely bothering him. I decided to leave it alone. After all, sometimes I didn't want to talk either. "Where's the butter?" he asked. I shrugged. Food shortages. Butter never lasted long on the shelves. Trying to distract us both, Mama asked, "Did anything else happen today, Goethe?" I immediately thought of having seen Dominic. Ever since that moment, I had debated whether to tell them,